On my 35th birthday, I didn't blow out candles surrounded by family. I stared at my phone while a cake I bought for myself melted under cheap frosting. On Facebook, my parents were cheering for my younger sister at the airport, filming her surprise trip to Rome. My father commented, "She's the only one who makes us proud." My mother added a red heart. I didn't cry. I didn't comment. I smiled, opened my banking app, and pressed withdraw. That was the moment everything changed, whether my family was ready or not. I was sitting at the small kitchen table in my apartment, the one just off base that always smelled faintly like detergent and burned coffee. The window was cracked open because the heater rattled too loudly when it ran, and outside I could hear traffic and a distant siren, the normal soundtrack of a weekday night. 35 years old. No balloons, no phone calls, just a single cupcake from the grocery store down the street, and my phone lighting up with notifications that weren't for me. I had woken up that morning expecting something, anything, a text from my mother, a call from my dad, even a lazy HBB from my sister. Instead, I got silence, the kind of silence you learn to recognize when you've spent your whole life being the reliable one, the one people assume doesn't need checking on. I brushed it off at first, told myself they'd call later. They always had an excuse ready. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed. I thought, finally. But it wasn't a call, it was a Facebook notification. A video auto-played on my screen before I even touched it. My sister Juniper was laughing at the airport, pulling a rolling suitcase behind her, my mother's voice squealing in the background. "She has no idea where we're taking her," my mom said, breathless with excitement. The caption read, "Surprise trip to Rome, so proud of this girl." The comments were pouring in, friends, relatives, church acquaintances, heart emojis, congratulations, jokes about pasta and wine. Then I saw my father's comment pinned near the top, like it deserved to be framed. "She's the only one who makes us proud." I stared at it longer than I should have, not because it was shocking, but because it was familiar. That sentence had followed me my entire life, just usually said behind closed doors, or implied in smaller ways. Seeing it written out for everyone to see felt like a bruise someone finally decided to poke in public. My mother had reacted to his comment with a heart, just one click, no words. I set my phone down and looked at the cupcake, vanilla with pink frosting. The bakery clerk had written 35 in crooked icing and smiled like it meant something. I hadn't even lit the candle yet. I didn't feel angry at first. I felt tired, bone-deep tired, the kind that settles in when you realize you've been carrying something heavy for so long that you forgot what it felt like to put it down. I've been in the U.S. military for over a decade. I joined straight out of high school because I needed structure and because I needed out. I learned early how to keep my emotions contained, how to show up on time, how to carry more than my share without complaining. My parents loved telling people their daughter was serving. They loved the pride by association, but they never really loved the inconvenience of it, the missed holidays, the short phone calls, the long silences. Juniper stayed close to home. She struggled, according to my parents, struggled with school, struggled with motivation, struggled with finding herself. Every struggle came with support, tutors, new cars, long talks at the kitchen table. I was the opposite. I was fine. I always had been. So they stopped asking. When my dad had a health scare years ago, I started sending money. At first, it was occasional. Then it became automatic. A few hundred every month into a joint account, just in case. They said it helped with bills, insurance gaps, groceries. I never asked for receipts. They were my parents. I trusted them. That afternoon, after reading my father's comment for the 10th time, I picked my phone back up. I didn't open Facebook again. I opened my banking app. The joint account was still there, sitting quietly like it always had. I told myself I was just checking, just curiosity. That's what I always told myself when something felt wrong. The transaction list loaded slowly, line by line. At first, everything looked normal. Utilities, groceries, gas. Then I saw a charge from a travel agency, $4,000. Another charge 2 days later labeled hotel deposit. Then a boutique I recognized from my sister's Instagram posts. And finally, a transfer with Juniper's name on it. The memo read, gift. My chest tightened. I did the math in my head without meaning to. Years of transfers, sacrifices I never talked about, vacations I skipped, repairs I delayed. I scrolled back further. The pattern repeated itself, over and over. My money wasn't keeping the lights on. It was funding a lifestyle I was never invited to enjoy. I leaned back in my chair and laughed once, softly. Not because it was funny, but because it finally made sense. Rome wasn't a surprise. I was. I hovered over the transfer option. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen. Tired eyes, hair pulled back tight, the same face that had learned how to keep it together no matter what. I thought about calling my parents. I thought about explaining. I thought about my father's comment, glowing proudly under a video that didn't include me. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I pressed withdraw. The confirmation screen popped up. I entered the amount, careful and deliberate. My hands were steady. When the final confirmation appeared, I hesitated for half a second. Then I tapped confirm. The money didn't disappear all at once. It would take days to move it back in pieces, but the decision was instant, irreversible. As the screen refreshed, I felt something unexpected settle over me. Not guilt, not fear, relief. My phone buzzed again, another notification. I ignored it. I lit the candle on my cupcake, watched the flame flicker, and made a wish I'd never made before. I wished to stop being invisible. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not the one person in my unit who knew more about my family than anyone else. I went to work the next morning like nothing had changed, pulled my hair back into a regulation bun, put on my uniform, and moved through the day on autopilot. That's one thing the military teaches you well, how to function even when your insides feel like they're coming apart at the seams. As I went through my tasks, my mind kept drifting backward, replaying moments I'd brushed off for years. Not dramatic scenes, just small, quiet memories that added up to something ugly when you finally lined them up side by side. When we were kids, Juniper always got the bigger room. It had better light, a door that didn't stick, and a closet twice the size of mine. My parents said it was because she needed the space. When she wanted piano lessons, they found the money. When she quit piano 2 months later, they told her it was okay to explore her passions. When I asked for help paying for a photography class in high school, my dad told me I should focus on practical goals. I got a job instead. I learned early how to be low maintenance, how to accept praise quietly and disappointment without protest. When I brought home good grades, my parents nodded and said, "We knew you would." When Juniper failed a class, they sat her down, talked it through, and promised to help her do better next time. I told myself that was just how families worked. Someone had to be the strong one. Joining the military felt like an escape at first. I told myself it was about service, about structure, about doing something meaningful. And it was. But it was also about finally choosing a path that didn't revolve around my family's expectations. My parents were proud, at least in public. They posted photos of me in uniform, bragged to neighbors, collected compliments like souvenirs. In private, it was different. Calls were short, questions were surface level. They never asked how I was really doing. Juniper stayed close. She went to community college on and off, moved back home more than once. She's still figuring things out, my mom would say, like it was a medical condition. Every setback came with a cushion, every mistake came with an excuse.
When my dad got sick, everything shifted. I remember the call clearly. I was in my car, parked outside the commissary, still in uniform. My mom's voice sounded small, scared. She told me about the diagnosis, the surgery, the bills insurance wouldn't cover. I didn't hesitate. I told her I'd help. It felt natural, necessary. That's what the dependable one does. We set up the joint account together, just in case, my dad said, for emergencies. I started with a few hundred here and there, then it became monthly, automatic. I adjusted my budget without thinking too hard about it, cut back where I could. I figured it was temporary. Years passed. The transfers continued. No one ever thanked me, not directly. When I brought it up once, casually, my mom waved it off. "Oh, honey, you know we appreciate you." And that was it. Appreciation without acknowledgement, gratitude without accountability. I didn't realize how much resentment I'd buried until I saw that comment on Facebook. It wasn't just about Rome. It was about 35 years of being quietly erased. By the time the money finished transferring back into my personal account, 3 days had passed. I checked my balance twice, half expecting something to reverse itself. It didn't. The number just sat there, solid and real. Mine. That was when the phone call started. The first one came from my dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then a text. "Call me when you get a chance. There's an issue with the account." An issue. I stared at the message and felt a familiar pull in my chest, the urge to fix things, to smooth it over, to make everyone comfortable again. I ignored it. The next day, my mom called. I answered out of habit. "Hi," she said, her tone tight. "We noticed a large amount of money is missing." "I withdrew it," I said calmly. There was a pause on the line. "You what?" "I took my money back." "That money was for emergencies," she snapped. I almost laughed. Like Rome. Another pause, longer this time. My dad's voice came on the line. "That's different." "How?" I asked. "Juniper needed a break," he said. "She's been under a lot of stress." I felt something harden in my chest. "I've been sending money for years. You never once asked if I needed a break." "That's not fair," my mom said. "You're stronger. You always have been." There it was, the sentence that explained everything. I hung up without another word. Within hours, the guilt messages started rolling in. Emails, texts from numbers I hadn't saved, family group chats that suddenly remembered I existed. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone thought they understood. No one asked why I'd done it. They just wanted it undone. That night, I sat on my couch and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I expected to feel sick with regret. Instead, I felt something close to calm, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew I wasn't going back. By the 4th day, I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. Not because the messages had stopped, but because I finally understood what they were really saying. None of them were asking if I was okay. None of them were asking why I felt hurt. Every message, every missed call, every carefully worded email circled back to the same thing: the money. It was almost impressive how quickly the concern shifted once they realized the transfers weren't a bank error. My parents had never monitored that account closely before. They never needed to. I was consistent, predictable, reliable. I was the kind of person you could forget about and still count on. Until I wasn't. I went back to the banking app that night, not to move anything else, but to look more closely. I needed to see it clearly, without excuses, without the emotional fog I'd lived in for years. I sat at my kitchen table again, the same place where I'd eaten most of my meals alone, and scrolled slowly through the transaction history. It was worse than I thought. Rome hadn't been a one-time indulgence. There were airline tickets from the year before, Paris, a resort deposit in Florida, designer stores I recognized because Juniper had tagged in selfies, smiling in mirrors with bags slung over her arm. There were transfers to her personal account, labeled "Help with Rent," and once, insultingly, "For being you." For being you.
I counted it all. I didn't rush. I didn't skim. I added it up carefully, line by line, the way I'd been trained to do everything in my career. The final number made my stomach drop. Over $40,000. Money I'd earned, money I'd sent in good faith, money I'd told myself was for emergencies and medical bills. I leaned back in my chair and pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw spots. I thought about the weekends I'd stayed in while my coworkers went out of town, the car repairs I'd postponed, the savings account I never quite managed to grow.
I thought about how many times I had said, I can't afford that right now, without realizing I actually could have. I wasn't poor. I was subsidizing someone else's comfort. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Juniper. Hey, can you call me? Mom and Dad are freaking out. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, I'm at work. What's going on? The dots appeared almost immediately. They said you took money out of the account. Is that true? Yes. Another pause. Longer. Why would you do that? They need it. That sentence did something to me. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. Juniper had no idea, or maybe she did and it was easier not to think about it. They used it to send you to Rome, I typed. Her response came slower this time. I didn't ask for that. I didn't know it was your money. I believed her. That was the worst part. Juniper wasn't cruel, she was just accustomed to being protected from consequences. She lived in a world where things appeared when she needed them and disappeared when they became inconvenient. I know, I wrote, but it was. A few minutes passed before my phone rang. I stepped outside onto the narrow balcony, the night air cool against my skin, and answered. Hey, Juniper said. Her voice sounded smaller than usual. They're really upset. I imagine they are. They said you're punishing them. I leaned against the railing and looked down at the empty parking lot. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm taking responsibility for myself. That money helped a lot, she said quietly. So did my silence, I replied. She didn't have an answer for that. We hung up without resolving anything. I went back inside and poured myself a glass of water, my hands steady. For the first time in days, I slept through the night. The next morning, my dad called again. This time, I answered. We need to talk, he said. No greeting, no preamble. I'm listening. That money was part of our safety net, he said. You can't just take it. I can, I said evenly, because it was mine. We had plans for it. You never included me in those plans. He sighed, heavy and dramatic. You don't understand how hard things have been. I almost said, you don't understand how hard it's been for me, but I stopped myself. He wouldn't hear it. He never had. You used my money for luxury trips, I said instead. That wasn't the agreement. We raised you better than this, my mom said sharply in the background. I closed my eyes. You raised me to be responsible. That's exactly what I'm being. I ended the call before they could regroup. The backlash escalated after that. My mom sent an email accusing me of betrayal. An aunt I barely spoke to texted that family helps family. A cousin asked if everything was okay, then suggested I apologize to keep the peace. Keep the peace? I'd been keeping it my whole life. At work, I threw myself into routine. Training sessions, evaluations. The structure grounded me. My unit didn't care about my family drama. They cared that I showed up, that I did my job, that I had their backs. In that environment, I was valued for what I did, not for what I provided. One evening, after a long day, I sat in my car and called the one person I trusted to be honest with me, my former supervisor, now a close friend. You did the right thing, she said after I explained everything. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It feels like it, I admitted, only because they trained you to feel that way. Her words settled over me like armor. That night, I logged into my bank account again, not to withdraw anything else, just to look. The number was still there, real, solid, a reminder that I finally had control over something I'd been giving away piece by piece for years. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I'd done. I was afraid of how long it had taken me to do it. The silence didn't last. 2 weeks after I withdrew the money, the tone of the messages changed. The panic sharpened. The patience disappeared. It was no longer confusion or disappointment. It was accusation, the kind that assumes guilt and demands surrender. It started with an email from my mother, subject line in all caps, "We need to talk." I opened it during my lunch break, sitting in my car with the engine off, the afternoon sun beating against the windshield. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't mention my birthday. She didn't even pretend this was about repairing a relationship. Instead, she wrote about stress, about bills, about how my father hadn't been sleeping, about how Juniper was emotionally fragile after learning about the money. She said I'd blindsided them. She said I'd embarrassed the family.
She said I needed to fix this quickly. The word apology appeared 3 times. The word money appeared 7. I closed the email and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the familiar pull to make things right at my own expense. That instinct didn't disappear overnight. It had been wired into me for decades. That evening, my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code told me everything I needed to know. "Hello?" I answered. "This is Aunt Lydia," a voice said briskly. "Your mother is beside herself." I leaned back on my couch and stared at the ceiling. "I'm sorry to hear that." "She's been crying for days," Lydia continued. "Your father, too. You've put them in an impossible position." "By taking back my own money?" "You know it's not that simple," she said. "They were counting on it." I closed my eyes. "Counting on me," I corrected. She sighed. "Family doesn't keep score." I almost laughed. Family shouldn't keep receipts either, but here we are. The call ended awkwardly, like all the others. No resolution, just pressure. The next escalation came publicly. I woke up one morning to a flood of notifications. My mother had posted on Facebook, not naming me directly at first, but not hiding either. Sometimes the people you sacrifice the most for are the ones who hurt you the deepest. Family values don't mean what they used to. Praying for wisdom. The comments poured in. Sympathy, validation, thinly veiled judgments. A few people tagged me outright. Others messaged privately asking what happened, urging me to be the bigger person. I sat on the edge of my bed, hand and phone, and felt something inside me go very still. This wasn't about misunderstanding anymore. This was about control, about rewriting the narrative so they could stay blameless. At work that day, I couldn't focus. I went through the motions, but my mind kept replaying the post, the comments, the implication that I was cold, selfish, ungrateful. I'd worn those labels quietly my whole life. Seeing them thrown around publicly felt like a line being crossed. That evening, I met a couple of people from my unit for dinner. Nothing fancy, burgers and fries at a place near base. They didn't know the details, but they could tell something was off. "You look like you're carrying a rucksack you forgot to put down," one of them said lightly. I smiled, grateful for the metaphor. "Something like that." After dinner, one of them pulled me aside. "Whatever it is," she said, "remember this. You don't owe anyone access to you just because they're related." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle in my chest. When I got home, I saw that my mother's post had been edited. This time, my name was included. "Merritt, if you're reading this, know that your father and I are heartbroken by your choices. We raised you better. Family is supposed to support each other." My hands trembled as I read it, not from shame, but from a slow burning anger I'd never allowed myself to feel before. They had made it public. They had painted themselves as victims, and they expected me to stay silent, like I always had. I opened the comment box and stared at it for a long time. I thought about ignoring it, about taking the high road, about letting it blow over. Then I thought about my birthday cupcake, about Rome, about $40,000, about a lifetime of being fine. I typed, "Mom, I gave you and Dad over $40,000 across several years to help with medical bills and essentials. You used that money for luxury trips, shopping, and gifts for Juniper. You forgot my 35th birthday and publicly stated that my sister was the only child who made you proud. I took back my money because I was being used, not supported. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with honesty and accountability, not guilt." I read it twice. My heart was pounding. Then I hit post. The reaction was immediate. Some relatives went quiet, others pushed back, but a few voices cut through the noise. An uncle commented that he'd always wondered how my parents afforded so many extras. A cousin said I was brave for speaking up. Someone else wrote, "Finally, the truth." I logged out and turned my phone face down. That night, I didn't sleep much. My mind replayed every possible outcome. But underneath the anxiety, there was something new. relief. I had told the truth out loud in my own words, and for the first time, I wasn't apologizing for it. For a few days after the post, I lived in a strange quiet. The notifications slowed, then stopped. It was as if the family collectively held its breath, waiting to see if I would backtrack, delete my comment, soften the edges. I didn't. I went to work. I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. I let the silence sit where it was. That was when I realized something important. Nothing bad was happening to me. No one showed up at my door. No one cut me off from something essential. The world didn't collapse because I'd told the truth. The fear I'd carried for so long, the fear of rocking the boat, had been built on the assumption that the boat was mine to lose. It wasn't. It never had been. With the money back in my account, I made myself slow down. I didn't splurge. I didn't make any dramatic purchases. I opened a notebook and wrote down things I'd put off for years because I'd convinced myself they were indulgent or irresponsible. A reliable emergency fund, a certification course I'd wanted to take but never had time or money for, physical therapy for an old training injury I'd ignored too long. Small things, sensible things, things that were suddenly possible. I enrolled in a professional certification program related to logistics and operations, something that could translate well when my military career eventually ended. The first night of class, I sat at my desk in civilian clothes, notebook open, listening to the instructor explain the syllabus. I felt nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not scared, hopeful. At work, something shifted too. I didn't realize how much emotional weight I'd been carrying until it was gone. I spoke up more in meetings. I volunteered for a leadership role I would have quietly avoided before. When my supervisor pulled me aside to tell me my performance had been noticed, I felt a flicker of pride I didn't immediately try to dismiss. "Whatever you're doing," he said, "keep doing it." I smiled and thanked him, resisting the urge to deflect. My chosen family, friends I'd built over years of moves and deployments, noticed the change too. One evening, a few of us gathered at a friend's apartment. Nothing formal, takeout containers spread across the counter, music low in the background. "You seem lighter," someone said, handing me a drink. "I feel lighter," I admitted. They didn't press. They didn't need details. They just clinked their cups against mine and smiled. That simple, wordless support meant more than any forced apology ever had. Juniper texted me a few times during that stretch. Her messages were cautious, uncertain. "I didn't know things were that bad. I'm sorry. Can we talk sometime?" I didn't respond right away, not because I was punishing her, but because I needed space to figure out what I actually felt. I knew she hadn't orchestrated everything. I also knew she'd benefited from it without question. Both things could be true. Meanwhile, my parents stayed quiet. No calls, no emails, no new posts. I suspected they were regrouping, deciding on their next move. It came a week later in the form of a voicemail from my father. "Your mother and I would like to talk in person," he said. His voice was measured, controlled. "This can't be resolved over social media. We're family. We should handle this like adults." I listened to it twice before deleting it. Later that night, I replayed it in my head. Handle this like adults. The phrase landed differently than it once would have. Adults didn't forget birthdays. Adults didn't take money under false pretenses. Adults didn't manipulate public opinion to avoid accountability. I texted Juniper back that night. "If we talk, it has to be honest, and it has to be separate from Mom and Dad." She responded almost immediately. "I understand." We met for coffee a few days later. She looked different, quieter, less polished. She fiddled with her cup while she talked, eyes downcast. "I didn't know they were using your money like that," she said. "I should have asked." "Yes," I said gently. "You should have." She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. "I'm trying to figure out who I am without them fixing everything." I believed her, or maybe I believed she wanted to try. That was enough for now. As for my parents, I didn't rush to meet them. I wasn't avoiding the conversation, I was preparing for it. I wrote down what I wanted to say, not accusations, boundaries, clear lines that didn't waver depending on guilt or pressure. I didn't know how it would end. I just knew one thing for certain. This time, I wasn't going to disappear to make them comfortable. The restaurant was quiet in the way upscale places always are on a weeknight. Low lighting, soft music, the clink of glasses instead of conversation. I chose it deliberately, public enough to keep tempers in check, neutral enough that no one could claim home field advantage. I arrived early and asked for a table in the back. When I sat down, I placed my phone's screen down and took a slow breath. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to win. I was here to tell the truth and see what happened when I didn't soften it. Juniper arrived first. She looked nervous, scanning the room before she spotted me. We hugged, brief, careful, and sat side by side. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. We were both waiting for the same thing. My parents walked in exactly on time. My mother's posture was rigid, her purse clutched tight against her side. My father looked thinner than I remembered, his jaw set in that familiar way he used when he wanted to project authority without raising his voice. We exchanged polite hellos and ordered water. The silence stretched. My father cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "I didn't agree to be lectured," I said calmly. "I agreed to talk." My mother's lips pressed together. "We want to fix this." I nodded. "Then let's be honest." My father folded his hands. "What you did hurt us." "What you did hurt me," I replied, "for years." My mother sighed sharply. "We've already said we made mistakes." "Have you?" I asked. "Because mistakes don't explain Rome." Juniper shifted beside me. My father leaned back. "That trip wasn't about you." "That's the problem," I said evenly. "Nothing ever was." My mother's eyes flashed. "We worried about Juniper more. She needed us." "And I didn't?" My voice didn't rise, but the question landed heavy. "Or did you just decide I'd be fine without you? Because I always was." Silence. I took a breath. "Tell me one thing you're proud of me for. One specific thing." My mother opened her mouth, closed it, looked at my father. "Well," he started, then stopped. The waiter returned with water, set the glasses down, left. They still hadn't answered. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. My mother's voice cracked. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," I replied. "You took my money, over $40,000, and used it for things you never told me about. You forgot my birthday, you told the world my sister was the only one who made you proud, and now you want me to apologize for setting a boundary?" My father's shoulders sagged. "We're under a lot of stress." "So was I said. "I just didn't make it your problem." My mother leaned forward. "Do you want us to beg?" "I want you to understand," I said, "and I want you to stop." "Stop what?" she snapped. "Stop using guilt. Stop rewriting history. Stop asking me to fix the consequences of your choices."
Juniper spoke, then her voice soft but steady. "They're right," she said to our parents. "I went through the statements. I saw everything." My mother turned to her, stunned. "Juniper?" "No." Juniper said, "I've had enough of this too." My father rubbed his face. "We were counting on that money. We might lose the house." I met his eyes. "You won't. You have options. Downsizing jobs, help from Juniper if she chooses, but not from me." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "So you're abandoning us?" I shook my head. "I'm stepping back. There's a difference." My father exhaled slowly. "What do you want from us?" "I want accountability," I said, "and I want boundaries respected. No more public posts about me, no more asking for money. If we have a relationship, it's based on honesty, not obligation." My mother stood abruptly. "I can't do this." My father hesitated, then stood too. "We'll think about what you said." "I hope you do," I replied. They left without another word. Juniper and I sat there for a moment, the table suddenly too big. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry it took me this long." "Me too," I said, and I meant both parts. We ordered dinner and talked about ordinary things. Classes she was considering, work projects I was excited about. It felt strange and good to talk without tension. When we finally stood to leave, I felt tired but steady. I'd said what I needed to say. Whatever happened next wasn't on me. Outside, the air was cool. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. The weeks after the dinner passed more quietly than I expected. There were no dramatic follow-up calls, no surprise visits, no public posts tagging me in guilt-soaked prayers. My parents retreated into themselves, stunned by the fact that their usual tools hadn't worked this time. And for the first time in my life, that retreat didn't pull me back in. Juniper and I started meeting once a week. Nothing formal, coffee walks, sometimes just sitting in my living room while the TV played in the background. She told me she was looking for her own apartment, that she'd signed up for night classes, that she was tired of being taken care of in a way that kept her small. I listened without trying to fix anything. That wasn't my job anymore.
At work, things continued to improve. The certification course was challenging, but I loved it. I stayed up late studying, not because I had to prove anything to anyone, but because it felt good to invest in myself without guilt. My supervisor noticed. A few months later, he pulled me aside and told me I was being considered for a leadership track assignment. I walked back to my desk with a smile I didn't try to hide. One evening, as I was making dinner, my phone rang. My father's name flashed on the screen. I stood there for a long moment, wooden spoon in hand, deciding. Then I answered. "Hi," he said. His voice sounded different, quieter. "Hi, I wanted to let you know I got a new job," he said. "It doesn't pay what the old one did, but it's something. Your mom picked up part-time work too." "That's good," I said, and meant it. There was a pause. Then he said, "I'm sorry." The word landed heavier than anything else he could have said. "I'm sorry for how we treated you," he continued, "for taking you for granted, for the money, for all of it." I closed my eyes. Tears came sudden and sharp. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," he added quickly. "I just needed you to know I see it now." We talked for a while about neutral things, about work, about the weather. When we hung up, I sat in silence, letting the moment settle. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, and that mattered. My mother didn't call. Instead, weeks later, she sent a short email, no subject line, no excuses, just a few sentences saying she was trying to do better and didn't expect anything from me. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest in a way she'd never been before. Life moved forward. I finished my course, I stepped into a new role, I started saving for a place of my own. On my 36th birthday, my apartment was full of friends from work, people from my unit, Juniper, sitting on the couch laughing at something stupid on TV. There was a cake. Someone had remembered the candles. As I looked around that night, I realized something that surprised me. Withdrawing that money hadn't been revenge. It had been self-preservation. I hadn't done it to hurt my family. I'd done it because I finally understood that love without respect isn't love at all. It's obligation. And obligation had been draining me dry.